Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
We live in the Matrix. It's just much more boring than the movie.
The whistleblower who says he stumbled upon a top-secret UFO program collecting UFO images and videos from classified military servers is revealing some of what he saw for the very first time. In an interview with investigative journalist Jeremy Corbell on his Weaponized podcast, former U.S. National Security official Matthew Brown describes but does not provide several videos that he says were gathered by the program called Immaculate Constellation. Brown claims that one video in particular stood out to him. He says he saw video of a UFO that looked like a large disc flying over what appears to be an ocean. He says it looked playful, that it was flying between the clouds and appeared startled at one point, as if it knew it had been caught on video.
What do you mean it looked startled? What does that mean?
You know, it's just looking at an area over the ocean is what it appears. And this thing just comes trundling along from like underneath the cloud cover, comes up, and then right when it's like almost center frame, it scoots off to the side and like tries to get out of,
like it comes into it and going, oops, somebody spotted me, I can get out of here.
Exactly. It was visibly, that's the feeling it had.
Brown says he doesn't know what that UFO is, whether it is actually a UFO or one of our own or one of our adversaries or just something not of this world. So yes, we still don't know what these UFOs are or where they come from. But at the end of the podcast, Brown proposed his own theory. He claimed the government knows and is hiding it from the public, leaving, quote, normal people behind.
Think they live here?
Yes.
For all intents and purposes?
Yes.
Always?
I don't know about always, but it certainly appears that they have been here for most of recorded history. I think they're both just as powerful as we think, but also less. And I think there is not a single they here. Certainly multiple factions of the same species, if not multiple species.
All right, joining us now is investigative journalist and co-host of the Weaponized podcast, Jeremy Corbell. Jeremy, first of all, did you see these videos yourself, or is he just describing them to you?
Well, actually, very interesting. A lot of people have seen these videos within the intelligence community. You have to remember that Matthew Brown is a whistleblower, and he's talking about IMCON, Immaculate Constellation, which is the first thing that he got exposed to. However, I can tell you that with my investigations with George Knapp, over the last decade, we've been exposed to a lot of military filmed footage where we have seen some of the footage that Matthew describes. That wasn't in the IMCON or Immaculate Constellation report. This is footage that can be seen on some of the classified servers by anybody who has that access. Now, separate from that, people have leaked footage to me and George Knapp. That is not the case with Matthew Brown, but we were able to hear what he said and know that some of that footage does exist because I and George Knapp, we both have been exposed to some of it.
All right, so for example, the footage that he described showing a disc that appeared playful with the clouds and then startled to be caught on camera, have you seen that?
Yeah, I have seen that.
And is it as he describes?
It is. I've seen it a long time ago, way before I ever met Matthew, and that is a piece of footage that within the intelligence community, if they have access to the servers, is kind of famous at this point. Now, does that get out to the public? Remember, this is something where, as journalists, we can't solicit, but over the years, as I said, George Knapp and I have been exposed to a whole lot of footage, most of which we've never deemed able to put out for security reasons.
You know, we've seen so many of these videos where we're not really sure what we're looking at, but he claims to you that the government knows exactly what we're looking at and is just not telling us.
Most certainly, and we need to kind of separate these differences. We're in the part of the interview you showed towards the end, we're asking Matthew Brown to give us his kind of conclusions, his personal opinions. There's one side of reporting where we just go through the facts of what he was exposed to. The other side, we're asking him to tell us his opinions on that, and that's made very clear in the interview. However, I will say this about Matthew Brown. Matthew Brown was exposed to the reality of UAP in official capacity. He was also directly exposed to elements of the UAP cover-up, including even to Congress. He is a firsthand direct whistleblower to these facts. He did pre-publication. He testified behind closed doors. He has done everything right. He is exemplary. He is a patriot.
What do you make of that claim he made at the end of the clip we just played, where he thinks whatever this sentient life is, that it lives here, that it's been here for a long time?
Yeah, the idea that the UAP phenomenon is from somewhere else has always been the writing, prevailing theory, but there is also a tandem theory that has been with us for decades, which is that there's got to be some sort of launch and land location here on Earth, as if they live or have a base here on Earth. Now, they could have come from somewhere far away before, but there are indications, as you see from a lot of the footage that George Knapp and I obtain and release, there's a lot of places where the activity is high, which would indicate that there is some sort of base here on Earth.
Where?
Great question. Don't know, but we know there are hot spots. So the phenomenon is ubiquitous across the globe, but we have been reporting a whole bunch on a hot spot just off the coast of California.
Yeah, I seem to have, I don't know if it's because we've got a lot of naval aircraft carriers and ships and pilots who've been out over the Pacific and who have taken these videos, these strange videos. That does seem to be where we see a lot of these things, or at least, you know, things that people think are unusual could be completely normal and explainable, but we just don't know yet.
No, they're not completely normal. They're not explainable. That's why they get sent to George Knapp and myself. And we have done maybe 12, 13 of these out to the public so people could see. The reason you get more of them in those areas because there's more hardware, there's more cameras, we have better sensor systems, we have ability to do thermal, infrared. So we're seeing an influx because our capture capabilities and technology is evolving, and that's why we're capturing more of them.
So Jeremy, what do you say to the skeptics out there who say folks like Jeremy Corbell are looking for a conspiracy when there's nothing there, that you're just creating a conspiracy out of nothing?
Well, that's verifiably false. It would take way more than me to create something like the UFO phenomenon. That's a really cute kind of theory. But ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm reporting things as we learn them. And what we've learned is pretty darned extraordinary. And I'm really, consensus reality needs to catch up with actual reality. That's the aim here. We're in a data-rich environment. We can't have a data-poor perspective.
Absolutely. Jeremy Corbell, great to have you on as always. Thank you.
This release was the start. There's more coming.
Okay. We look forward to having you back on to talk about it. Thanks, Jeremy.
So, Ross, the major question, do you think the Pentagon confirming it's investigating the allegations of Jake Barber is a major step forward here?
It's an incremental step forward. I think it's important because we do know that the new director of ARROW, the Pentagon's UAP investigation office, a chap called Dr. John Kozlowski, were assured he's very serious about investigating the phenomenon. And he admitted to the Congress under oath late last year that he was indeed now talking to first-hand whistleblowers. So to get this confirmation now from the Pentagon that they are now indeed investigating is positive. But as Dr. John Kozlowski has said to several people, his powers are very limited. The Pentagon dictates what he's allowed to reveal and what he's allowed to say publicly. And there isn't a very proud history, I'm afraid, of the Pentagon wanting to be very forthcoming about what we do believe is a covert UAP retrieval and reverse engineering program. So really, I think a lot depends on the degree of transparency and openness that's permitted by the Pentagon, and a lot of that hangs on the new administration. It really does rest with the president and also to some degree with the Congress whether or not we're going to get any movement on any further disclosure about this alleged covert program.
It's very interesting. I know you say there is very clear intent from senior echelons within the Pentagon leadership to continue to suppress this story. Tell me more about that.
Look, there's been for decades, I believe, a covert program where the United States, I do believe, has hid its recovery, its retrieval of non-human technology. I know a lot of people will roll their eyes and scoff at such a notion, but the evidence is now getting pretty overwhelming that this is real. There have been noises from very senior people in this new administration, including the new DNI, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, the head of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, and also the head of the FBI, Nash Patel. These people have all indicated their willingness to investigate the UAP issue. What's interesting, though, is that the Pentagon recently came back with an answer to the White House on the drone incursions that you and I have spent a lot of time talking about, and they tried to explain them away as FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, authorised drones, that this was somehow some kind of authorised drone program. That's completely in contradiction to what the FAA said under oath to the Congress in December. So we're getting mixed messages from this new administration. And I'm not confident that we're going to see any degree of transparency. A lot rests, for example, on whether Anna Paulina Luna, the congresswoman who's launched this new transparency committee, is going to be allowed to ask the tough questions in a public hearing, and whether the new president, President Trump, is indeed serious with his promise to get to the bottom of the UAP mystery. So far, I'm a little bit skeptical, but we'll wait and see.
Okay, yeah, wait and see for sure. I want to return to some of your thoughts on some of the government operations that Barber was a part of. Here he is speaking about his work on what he calls the range. Let's listen.
A lot of the work we did was on what I call the range, where the U.S. government and its private partners use to test all kinds of things, weapon systems and resilience to weapon systems of certain craft. And so you see a lot of exciting things.
Ross, in your experience rigorously covering so many UAP-related stories now, how does Barber's account compare to other whistleblower testimonies?
It totally correlates. I mean, Natasha, the reason I'm so sure about Barber telling the truth is because I was referred to Mr. Barber by people inside the legacy program, scientists who are frustrated that they think the public should have a right to know this information, that they say there's no good reason for the continued secrecy. And one of the problems with the military and the intelligence community is often they maintain secrecy for, frankly, no good reason. I do think that we're on the edge of a possible disclosure if this new government decides to be candid. And I think there's really no good reason why the continued secrecy should continue in the way it has. The government does have the opportunity to finally, once and for all, admit that we are not alone, that there is indeed an advanced intelligence of a non-human nature engaging with this planet. But whether the Pentagon wants to admit that or not, there is a certain inevitability, because Jake Barber and his team at Skywatcher are now trying to replicate what they did on the range privately with the backing of private equity.
A lot in government do not take this seriously, and a lot in the media do not take this seriously and mock us at NewsNation, me specifically, for covering it the way we do. They think it's like a gambit, that it's a joke that we just do because it plays to all the tinfoil hat people. They're wrong. It's about transparency from our government, and they're not telling us the truth. It doesn't mean that they've got a zoo of little green men. But today, the president signed an executive order that establishes a new federal task force to combat rogue drones and also enables local law enforcement to start taking drones down. What does this mean in terms of the march for transparency and truth? Let us ask former Pentagon UFO investigator and whistleblower Luis Elizondo. Lou, thank you for joining me.
Chris, always my privilege for being here. And before we begin, let me just give you a big thank you for your last segment on behalf of a lot of us veterans covering that. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, listen, it is my privilege and pleasure. I mean, you know well, you guys have been keeping people like me alive all over the world in the worst situations when you know we're going to report on things that you're not going to want to hear. So you don't have to convince me who's the best of us. So back to the rest of us. Trump signing this executive order matters because?
Yeah, first of all, it's I think it's really something that hasn't been done before. It's recognizing the issue. The bottom line is we don't know what's in our skies, and drones continue to be an issue. In fact, back in 2023, there was actually a collision with something unidentified with an aircraft. This is something we've been saying for a long time, for many years. And in fact, some of our best pilots as well, F-18 pilots and other pilots as well, F-22 pilots, have been filing some of these with what you call near air collision air safety reports. So this is nothing new. I think it's fantastic that this administration is taking this topic seriously. We have been calling for the creation of a task force now for some time. And I think it's great news that our government is finally listening to the demands of the people and to our national security apparatus.
Now, in terms of the avenues to go down, a couple of controversial aspects. First one comes from the new AARO director, okay, Kozlowski. Listen to what he said.
How much of a priority is this work for President Trump and Secretary Hegseth?
No new directives, but lots of support. We seem to have the full support of the administration.
Can you say categorically that there is no intact spacecraft or part of a spacecraft that the U.S. government is holding?
I have not been able to corroborate any of those claims. It's a potential problem, a national security problem, a safety of flight issue.
Potential non-human intelligence.
Perhaps.
So, potential non-human intelligence, he says perhaps. That opens the extraterrestrial argument. But on the other part, he's contradicting Dave Grush. He's saying, because Dave Grush says he knows, whistleblower, he knows that they have spacecraft or pieces of something, and this guy says no. What do you think?
Well, look, first of all, Kozlowski is not your quote-unquote father's Oldsmobile. He is not like the previous AARO director that was really just trying to obfuscate and push the narrative in one direction. Kozlowski is very well trained. He has incredible experience in the intelligence community, and he's very well respected. So when he's telling you something to the effect of, look, there's something here, we don't know what it is, and we can't rule out it being extraterrestrial, I think it's fair. Now, to say that he hasn't found any evidence to substantiate what Dave Grush said, the bottom line is that there's a lot of people that don't trust AARO, and that's a fact because of the previous leadership, not Kozlowski's fault. In fact, this was highlighted just a few weeks ago when the FBI team that's also studying and investigating UAP for the U.S. government and the Bureau reported to Congress. And the result of that was Representative Luna coming out in public and saying that maybe the time has come to reconsider and perhaps defund AARO, because in the words of Luna, the briefing she received from the FBI was a 10 out of 10. So I don't think Kozlowski is necessarily lying or deceiving. I just don't think a lot of people trust AARO enough yet to go to AARO instead of Congress.
The other narrative is this, and it shows how far behind on this story so much of the media is. The Wall Street Journal releases what they call a bombshell story about how the U.S. government, it's this guy is calling the Wall Street Journal's story a bombshell, not the Wall Street Journal saying it themselves, that the U.S. government fabricated alien tech and allowed UFO rumors to fester in order to cover up their super secret tech. Now, you know, we've been talking about this for years. This is an aspect. I want you to clarify what's real and not real here, because I see it as a 50-50. Does the U.S. government allow UFO stuff to cover some of their own tech and activities? Yes.
In fact, it has in the past. You're absolutely right.
But they have not fabricated everything that's supposedly alien technology. There's a lot of stuff they have no idea what it is.
You're absolutely correct. In fact, what you're referring to is back in the early days of the stealth program, what they used to call tacit blue and have blue programs back in the 70s and 80s, before we actually introduced the world to the fact that we had stealth technology. A lot of times we were testing this new technology over our test ranges like Area 51. And unfortunately, sometimes the civilian population would see this type of technology, and rather than correct the public and say, no, this is actually our technology, we were okay with allowing them to create their own narrative that it was some sort of unidentified flying object, UFO in the old vernacular. That's what we call denial and deception, also cover for action. It's not uncommon in the intelligence community. It's not uncommon in the classified world. The problem is if you do it too much, when you have real UAP issues, then what you wind up doing is oversensitizing people to this story that everything is just U.S. tech, when in the reality is it's absolutely not all U.S. tech.
Lou, thank you so much, as always. Appreciate you. Hopefully this is a step in the right direction. We'll be on it.
Thank you for covering. You're doing a great job, Chris. Thank you so much.
Recent UFO whistleblower claims are gaining some traction on Capitol Hill tonight. Air Force veteran David Grush told NewsNation exclusively earlier this month that a top-secret military program is in possession of UFOs of non-human origin.
I've been told that there have been attempts to bring down craft, that we've acted offensively against non-human craft.
There have been instances, and there are certain techniques.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
While I can't get into the specifics because that would reveal certain U.S. classified operations, I was briefed by a few individuals on the program that there were malevolent events like that.
The Pentagon has thus far denied Grush's claims. Joining us now is NewsNation Washington correspondent Joe Khalil. And Joe, you had a chance to speak with Senator Josh Hawley today, and he had some interesting insight.
Yeah, he did, Elizabeth. He said that he thinks some of the claims that he's hearing from David Grush, this whistleblower, make sense to him. He's not ready to buy into everything that Grush says. He wants to investigate more. But he does say that it was just recently senators were told about the true scope of just how many UAP reports there have been. It was largely hidden before then. So Hawley says he's no longer surprised by the secrecy around this issue.
I was surprised when I learned that there were many of these unidentified and unaccounted for aerial platforms out there.
Another lawmaker raising concerns related to whistleblower David Grush's allegation that the government maintains a secret UFO retrieval program and has close to a dozen aircraft in its possession not believed to be made by human hands. Senator Josh Hawley says he can't verify whether the UAP program exists, but says some of the claims Grush is making track with what Hawley's heard in briefings.
He's saying that the government knows more about this than they had previously let on. That doesn't really surprise me, because it looks to me like the government has been tracking these UAPs for a long time now and has not been saying much about it.
And while other senators have been more skeptical about Grush's allegations,
if we'd really found this stuff, there's no way you could keep it from coming out. My gut belief is that there's a physical piece of a spacecraft or an intact spaceship. Would have known about it by now.
Hawley says he doesn't buy that, telling NewsNation the government is good at hiding things when it really wants something to remain secret. If the UAP program really does exist, whistleblower Grush says very few people are made aware of it. Even those at the Pentagon who respond to UAP reports are in the dark, he says.
I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They provided me documents and other proof that there was, in fact, a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
And Elizabeth, a bit of exclusive news here that you're only going to see on NewsNation. We've just learned that the House hearing that's being planned right now on UAPs and partly on Grush's claims, that is being planned as a field hearing. So it wouldn't happen in Washington in the Capitol. Rather, it would happen in Florida, I'm told, sometime toward the middle or end of July. Those plans are up in the air, but that at least is the plan that lawmakers want to pursue for this hearing coming up.
Why Florida?
Elizabeth? You know, I'm not exactly sure why Florida. I know 2 of the 4 members of Congress who are really pushing for this are from Florida, but I'm not exactly certain why that state. We're just going to have to find out. We'll keep digging on that.
Well, I hope it's more than they just want to sleep at home that night. All right, Joe Khalil, stay on top of it. Thanks so much.
Okay, turning now to a different story that we're following today, a trial surrounding UFO whistleblower David Grush. He is taking a Virginia sheriff's office to court, alleging that the department purposely released his medical records and they landed in a hit piece. The trial begins today. NewsNation's Ryan Bass joins us live from St. Petersburg, Florida, with the latest here. Ryan, good morning to you. What's at the heart of this lawsuit, and what are we expecting as the trial gets underway?
So, Marky, David Grush says that the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office illegally released these records, which ended up in a news article just a few weeks after he testified on Capitol Hill about these explosive UFO claims that he actually exclusively told NewsNation about back in 2023. Now, he believes the medical info was leaked on purpose, all to smear him and discredit his record. Now, he says these were private medical records from 2014 and 2018 tied to past struggles with PTSD and depression, which was never meant to be out there. And he thinks it was leaked to The Intercept to make him look bad after he testified before Congress about secret UFO recovery programs and claimed that people were hurt in this cover-up. NewsNation spoke to a Harvard professor who specializes in UFO research, who says there's a lot more at stake here and not to take our eye off the bigger picture.
The personal information about David Grush is irrelevant to this matter. It may be an obstacle in terms of him gaining credibility, but that's not really the issue. The fundamental question is whether the U.S. government has in its possession materials, and they're trying to reverse engineer those materials from crash sites of unidentified objects that end up being extraterrestrial in origin or made by some super non-human intelligence.
So there's a lot more, Marky, that could come out of this trial related to UFO and those whistleblower claims. Now, Grush is suing the sheriff's office for $2.5 million. The sheriff's office responded saying, we didn't do anything wrong here. We just followed the law. Now, the department, again, reiterates that. The trial, it will begin this morning, Marky, about 9 o'clock Eastern time in Virginia. We're expecting key testimony on how those records were shared and whether Virginia law was actually broken here. And, Marky, this could actually open the door to figure out if someone in the intel community actually leaked this info, which led to those medical records being public.
Today, one of the whistleblowers testifying next week is former Navy fighter pilot, Lieutenant Ryan Graves. He joins us live. Lieutenant, an honor to be with you this morning. Thanks for giving us some of your time.
Good morning.
Well, you, David Grush, and former intelligence commander David Fravor all set to speak next week, midweek on this hearing. What do you hope comes of this, and what do you plan to share?
Well, really, my goal for this hearing is to ensure that I can educate members of Congress about what our pilots and air crew have been seeing. Congress is key to influencing change on this topic, and so being able to bring more cases and sharing what I've been receiving from other witnesses, I think will be what I'll be targeting in this hearing.
Yeah. You've been vocal about this for years now. I mean, the unidentified objects you've seen, the near misses that you've encountered midair. You told the New York Times back in 2019 that these objects persisted, showing up sometimes at 30,000 feet, 20,000 feet sea level, that they could accelerate, slow down, and then hit hypersonic speeds. I know there are a lot of people scared to come forward, worried about their jobs and their families. Why did you decide to be vocal, and how big of a widespread concern has this been for military pilots?
Well, I decided to come forward in 2017 when I saw the New York Times article of one of these objects that I was airborne for. I had seen, as we were flying around, I had seen debriefed on the tapes. And when I had seen that video in the New York Times, I realized this was a problem that was still a safety hazard for the pilots that were flying out there, and that there really truly was no mechanism for this to get resolved currently within the Department of Defense. And that really led me into communicating and educating Congress and others about the severity of this issue, and also the national security implications of having unknown objects in our airspace and in our training ranges.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, NewsNation broke the exclusive story with whistleblower David Grush, who came forward a little bit more than a month ago. His story, his allegations have led us to this moment, the hearing next week. But I got to ask you this, because there are a lot of Americans who aren't sold, right? Who have this cartoon vision of little green aliens, and they're just not buying it. And that's how Representative Tim Burchett put it yesterday. What do you tell people and lawmakers who are skeptical about what's going to be shared next week and the allegations being made here?
Well, again, I think we need to just remember that this is a pretty clear issue when we zoom back out. It's simply a matter of national security and aviation safety, or perhaps for scientific curiosity. Having unknown objects in our airspace, in our commercial airspace, in our tactical training ranges are all very serious safety hazards. And yes, there is a larger conversation around what the government may have known about this and what efforts have been put into understanding this. And I'm eager, I think, like most Americans, to hear what Mr. Grush has to say about that. But again, I'll be focusing on working to destigmatize this topic so more whistleblowers, such as Grush or more witnesses, can come forward without fear to their career or their personal life.
Yeah. And I know that your foundation, Americans for Safe Aerospace, has recently started the UAP Witness Campaign. What's the mission there for you? What do you hope to see come of that and achieve?
Well, you know, we didn't start Americans for Safe Aerospace with the intent of receiving whistleblower witnesses reports, but that's what we've received. As it turns out, there are individuals looking to take advantage of some of the whistleblower laws that have come about in Congress, although there is no public-facing mechanism in order to help these folks take advantage of that legislation. I've taken advantage of what I've seen, or I should say, not the whistleblower laws, but I have come forward as a whistleblower, and I have walked that path. And so I've been guiding other folks in that process, and we've essentially had enough people come forward that we've had to turn this into a regular process. We've made contacts at various people on Capitol Hill so that we can forward our best cases to the appropriate people. And we're looking to do that simply because the people are out there, they're reaching out to us, and we're certainly not going to ignore these people.
Yeah. Well, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, it'll be all eyes on you, next week and the three witnesses there. We're wishing you the best of luck, and thank you for giving us time on Morning in America.
Thank you so much for having me.
Joining me now for more perspective on the military side of things is Sean Cahill. He's a retired U.S. Navy chief, master at arms, who witnessed the Tic Tac UFO incident back in 2004. He's also an investigative filmmaker. Thank you so much for joining me, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good evening, Nick. How are you?
I'm well. Sean, I want to talk about more of the military side of these things, because I think one of the things that is the biggest takeaway from me, like yourself, also a veteran, is that there is a serious side of reporting things that you see, sticking to the facts, and credibility is indeed paramount.
That's absolutely true, and I think that is what has made it possible for these hearings, is that we've been lucky enough to have people of a caliber that was untarnished come forward with incredible information and have the courage to share that with us. That didn't work for a lot of regular folks over the course of the last 80 years, so it's good that we're here. It's not limited just to folks like you and I that have served, but it's been very helpful that those people have been courageous to come forward and stand in front of Congress.
That being said, Sean, it doesn't seem clear that they're always getting the support that they need. Let's listen to a soundbite and talk about it on the other side.
Right now, military witnesses to UAP have limited options for reporting UAP. But more concerning is that commercial aviation sector has not adapted to the lessons that the military has implemented. The military and Department of Defense has stated that UAP represent a critical aviation safety risk. We have not seen that same language being used in the commercial markets. They are not acknowledging this risk.
So clearly the standard chain of command that you and I would use does not seem to be in place here. What is the process by which you think they should be able to report this information so that it is received in a way that is taken seriously?
Well, we have normal channels that are already in place for normal aircraft accidents, events, celestial events, and weather-related events. So those same channels should be utilized. It'll be up to the United States government to determine whether or not a specific report may have national security value and may have to be quarantined off from the other data. But the reporting process should be easy. The infrastructure is already in place.
And you reported your own. I want to go back to when you actually talked about what you experienced. Let's take a look. Listen.
The Tic Tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens.
Yeah, that was actually a favor talking about the Tic Tac incident that he saw. Talk to me about that and what your takeaway was from that.
It was a very interesting week. It was taken very seriously by the folks that were involved in hunting down the validity of the objects and then sending out the sorties. And of course, we've heard from the pilots. At the end of the week, I was astonished at the lack of response by the chain of command, how coolly the captain had had reacted to the information, and the fact that even myself as the chief master at arms on board, which was the senior law enforcement officer, there was no post briefing, there was no discussion, at least at my level. So it was very telling. For a while, I convinced myself that it was probably one of our programs, but since 2017, when more evidence has come out, I have absolutely flipped the coin on that, and I'm sure it's not.
Sean, I have to tell you, I really appreciate you taking time to meet with us and talk with us this afternoon, but I have every reason to believe we will be discussing this again. Sean Cahill, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick.